welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lilly.
And I'm Sara.
And tonight we'll be discussing The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. But first, what's something great that happened recently?
Something great that happened recently. Well, the thing I was going to use actually hasn't happened yet, so I guess I can't use it.
That is actually the only rule, yeah.
Yes. Something great that happened recently is we're getting episodes of The Wheel of Time, season 2. We just got episode 5 today, and I'm really enjoying the show so far.
No further questions.
And you're something great?
I went to Vancouver for the very first time.
How was that?
It was amazing. Okay, this is me being a dumbass American. I did not realize how big of a city Vancouver is.
Did you think it was a small city?
I mean, I figured it was on the same level as Seattle, which was definitely wrong.
Yes, that is incorrect.
No, it's much bigger. It was so much fun. We discovered a corner store that sold Korean street food.
Ooh.
That were corn dogs covered in dry ramen noodles, and it was amazing. We also went to the Chinatown up there for dim sum, which was great. We kind of planned our entire trip around dim sum.
As you should.
Yes. And then we're a little disappointed by the aquarium, but that's not fair because we are comparing it to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and that's unfair.
Yeah, that's an unfair comparison.
I liked it. The seals were very cute, but they didn't have cuttlefish. And that is this household's only mark for a good aquarium.
You should read The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor, because there's a lot about cuttlefish in it.
Sure.
I mean, we're not going to read it for the podcast, but there is a lot about cuttlefish in it.
I mean, really, that's Daniel's consideration, not mine.
Danny should read The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor.
Yes. All right. I will work on that. Anyway, it was amazing. So much good food. We were only there for a little over 24 hours.
But it's such a short flight for you that is not silly.
Yeah, we'll probably drive next time, honestly.
It's not a long drive.
It's a 3-hour drive.
Yeah.
We spent more time waiting at the airport than we would have spent driving there.
Yep.
I had a scheme planned out that ended up falling through, which is why we flew. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Have you? No, not have you read anything good lately. More importantly, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking cider. It is a San Francisco cider, not my usual cider. Rosé, quite lovely. I'm enjoying it.
Rosé cider.
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
I am drinking, it's called Dorian Gray tea, as opposed to Earl Grey.
I like it already.
We went to a festival over the summer over in Western Washington, and I got some fancy teas. This is called Earl Grey with a youthful twist.
What makes it particularly youthful?
I'm not sure. The description is black tea, apple, cornflower, linden, mallow, and bergamot. It's basically just Earl Grey.
Maybe it's the apple.
I guess.
They're the apples of youth.
Anyway, so I'm drinking that with a little bit of bourbon because why not?
Why not?
Now, have you read anything good lately?
I read Things They Lost by Okwiri Oduor, which I mostly liked. It's more literary than the fantasy I tend to read. And like I said, it was good. I enjoyed it, except there was at one point sudden puppy death, which was not warned for. I was not expecting it and was kind of horrifying. And that I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all.
We could probably do an entire episode on how unacceptable pet death is.
Yeah.
You're not proving anything. Oh, yeah, you can make me cry. Wow.
No, so to be fair, that was not the vibe of this scene.
Okay.
It was not trying to tug at heartstrings in that way. This book has been very matter of fact about some pretty horrifying, horrible things like child abuse and child death and things like that. So it felt in keeping with the tone of the novel, and it didn't feel like it was something that the author put in for shock factor or anything.
Okay.
But of course, that doesn't make it any more pleasant to read about.
Sure. But it does make it, I mean, still upsetting, but less upsetting from a narrative perspective.
Yeah. I mean, definitely still upsetting, but I don't want to say it felt earned because puppy death is never earned, but it didn't feel out of place with the way the novel had progressed.
The text treated it appropriately.
Yeah.
That's fair. That doesn't mean I want to read a book that has appropriate puppy death.
No. And like, I would have appreciated knowing about it going into it.
That's my thing. I love the website doesthedogdie.com.
Yes.
Do you use that?
I don't, mostly because I generally hear about dog deaths or animal death in advance.
Any animal, yeah. It's not just Does the Dog Die, but that's the website. But I think if you're prepared for it, it can be a lot easier.
Yes, I agree. And like, I was reading this book because it was finalist for the Subjective Chaos kind of awards, which I am a judge for. And the person who nominated it did include some warnings. So like, I knew to expect the child abuse and like the child death and all of that, but this was not mentioned.
Oh.
So like, it had that extra layer of being like, I think that I know what's coming, or like what some of the warnings for this book are. And then you find out that you're missing one.
Yeah.
It was not my favorite moment in the book.
Fair. If you said otherwise, I'd be concerned, actually.
Yeah. But I did, like, overall, I think the book is a really interesting look at a mother-daughter relationship in a way that I don't see very often in the fantasy that I read. So I did like the book, but it also had this thing that I was not expecting and did not like.
That'll happen.
It does sadly happen.
Well, on a completely different tone, I'm still reading Clive Barker.
I feel like Clive Barker might have animal death, though.
Oh, yeah, but like, actually, I don't think he does.
Really?
Or, okay, I shouldn't say that. Out of what I have read, I have not encountered it that I remember. Wait, hold on 1 second.
I just feel like horror as a genre tends to have, and this is a huge generalization, of course, but I feel like horror as a genre tends to have more animal death than not.
But that is for cheap thrills.
Fair enough.
That is the lazy way out. I'm currently reading Cabal. I could talk about this for hours, and you know that because I have just cut a bunch of that out of context conversation out of this. Because we're actually going to be talking about the return of the king. Which king do you think they're talking about, Sarah?
I mean, it's got to be Aragorn.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it, though?
It has to. There's no other king it could be.
Technically, there's a king of the hobbits.
Yeah, but that's not who the title is referring to.
So, my understanding is that Tolkien actually wanted to name the book The War of the Ring.
Specifically, this third part.
Yes, this book. We have decided that we are treating them like 3 different books.
Yes, we are. And that does sound correct to me. I think that he did want to read it, although I don't see anything about that in his introduction, but his introduction is just a synopsis. So I suppose it makes sense that he doesn't talk about his nomenclature.
I'm remembering it from, again, the DVD extras of the Lord of the Rings adaptation by Peter Jackson.
I mean, and the War of the Ring, I think, is accurate in the sense that there's a war and it's about the ring. But I do kind of think that it's too general a title because I feel like it could be applied to the first 2 books too.
I disagree. Oh my God. That's such a better title for this book. Are you kidding?
I mean, I'm not saying that it's not a better title, but I feel like it's a better title for the series as a whole than it is for this third book.
Oh, okay. So if the whole trilogy was called The War of the Ring, and this third book was called The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, actually, I would like that a lot.
I like that. Yeah, okay. I'm on board.
Yeah, because I think, like, The War of the Ring really encompasses everything that starts in Fellowship up to the end of Return of the King.
Yeah, but whereas The Lord of the Rings is such a specific guy.
Yeah, and like we mostly see him in this third book. So if those were switched, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I'm on board with that. I'm going to argue that I would still rather have The War of the Ring over The Return of the King.
Yeah, and I think it's a better title, but I think Return of the King is more specific to this portion of the story.
I think it's too specific. It focuses too much on Aragorn because you are going to argue that Tolkien is not obsessed with kingship later on. And this being titled, this is a whole fucking book about Aragorn, kind of ruins that argument, don't you think?
No.
All right.
I don't think.
Hey, before we get too much farther, we're going to spoil the whole series and also this whole book.
Yep. This is a spoiler. I was going to say spoiler free. No, that's not true. We are not segregating our spoiler and non-spoiler content in this episode. So spoilers abound.
As you might have been able to tell by the spoilers I just gave.
But also, if you have managed to make it to 2023 without being spoiled for any part of this story up until now, I applaud you.
Okay, that's a flawed argument because you don't know make it until 2023. You don't know how long they've been making it for. What if some lost high schooler managed to find our podcast?
I mean, still, I think that it's impressive that in the year 2023, if they're in high school, say 14 to 18, and they still have not been spoiled for what happens in The Lord of the Rings, which is a very popular Peter Jackson movie series. Lots of memes about it. I'm going to be pretty impressed.
Fair enough. So you really do think Return of the King is a better title?
I do.
All right.
Tolkien focuses an awful lot on the Return of the King.
Only lending credence to my argument that he sucks the dick of the monarchy.
So I disagree. I mean...
Yeah, not that he doesn't.
I'm not saying that he doesn't necessarily, but like in our episode on the Two Towers, we had a whole discussion about Boromir versus Aragorn, and you were making the argument that Tolkien really focuses on Aragorn and is like writing him up because he's royalty. And I think that the way that Tolkien describes Faramir in this book is a counterpoint to that argument, because he talks a lot about, let me see if I can find the actual like passages that I have written down. But he talks a lot about how great Faramir is and how like noble he is. And I think that what Tolkien appreciates in Aragorn too is less his royalty and more his like thoughtfulness and introspection, which I'm pretty sure we can both agree not exactly Boromir's strongest traits.
Oh, poor baby. But yeah, you're right.
Boromir is a man of action, not necessarily given to thinking about what he's doing.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in this book about Aragorn. I mean, okay. He has superpowers because he's the king.
No, that's not because he's the king. It's because he's Númenórean.
Is that different? I don't think that's different.
Not all Númenóreans were kings.
Yeah, but the only Númenóreans now are the line of the king.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily make him magic because he's the king. He's magic because he's Númenórean.
All right. I think one could argue that that's awful convenient that the one story that Tolkien decided to write out all the way had the one person with superpowers was because they were Númenórean, and that also happens to make them king. That's awfully convenient.
He wrote an awful lot of stories out just because he died before he could actually finish them because he was a perfectionist.
Okay, we haven't read them for this episode, so we're supposed to pretend they don't exist. But also, in my recollection, it's still always the nobility. Like, he has a hard-on for the nobility.
He does. A lot of his stories do focus on nobility, it's true. And I think that part of that is the genre that he's writing in.
Yeah.
Right? Like that kind of pseudo-mythic, Arthurian-esque legend focuses kind of by definition on
That's true.
Nobility.
But he is choosing to not subvert that.
Yes.
Like, he is not an old enough writer that we don't have to hold him to that option.
Trying to think if any of the writers that I know from that era actually subvert. There probably were some, to be fair.
Plenty of American authors wrote about heroes who weren't nobility, so
That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, it's not actually an issue I have with this, but it's hard to read this and not think, wow.
Frodo's not noble.
Of course he is. What? Are you kidding
okay.
me?
He kind of is.
Yeah, of course
I
he
take it back.
is.
I take it back. Sam's not noble.
Yeah, but he's also clearly the sidekick.
He is clearly the sidekick.
He's the celebrated sidekick, which is something, but still.
He gets a happier ending than Frodo does.
Yeah. And that's a PTSD thing, ain't it?
Yep. Poor Frodo.
Oh, the fascinating mental health story around Frodo going to the Grey Havens before PTSD was really a thing that was talked about, at least as far as I understand it, is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense though, because Tolkien was in war. Like, he knows how that affected people. So
yeah, no, he wrote about this concrete thing before. Oh, okay, I shouldn't say that. I don't know when people started diagnosing people with PTSD, but my understanding was that it was fairly recent in the scheme of things. Shell-shocked was the phrase used, I think, for a while. I've very lightly researched this. Very badly lightly researched this. PTSD does show up in ancient texts, but it's strangely phrased.
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily had the vocabulary that we do now.
There was an understanding that war affects people, of course.
Yeah.
Like I said, shell-shocked, and there have been some other things.
Trying to figure out when we first started using the terminology.
I have done minor research for my my medieval fantasy romance.
And
so I did read a little bit about PTSD versus, so shell-shocked was World War One, and then PTSD is much more recent.
Yeah.
But anyway, not the point. But this is an experience that Tolkien explores and sort of sees through to its best possible conclusion through the narrative. I would say going to Elf Heaven is the best possible conclusion for most people. Shell-shocked or not.
I mean, it's certainly not a bad conclusion.
I don't think it's coping well, but
I don't think it's coping well, no. Frodo is clearly still suffering. And it's not a happy conclusion for the reader, because as a reader, you have to deal with the parting of Frodo and Sam.
I think that's important, though. The consequences of war is that you don't get a happy ending.
Sure, yeah, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying it's not happy for the reader.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
It's not a happy ending as one normally calls it.
I think in Frodo you really see the fact that Tolkien actually saw combat.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I know this is a fantasy book, but the dealing with mental health and ramifications of war is so much more visceral than I have read in any fantasy novel, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's not necessarily tackled head on. So
No.
I wouldn't call it visceral, but it's certainly alluded to. And there's that huge time, well, maybe not huge, but there's a year time gap that's kind of glossed over, which is, I think, when Frodo would have been really struggling. And we don't see any of that.
Okay. Visceral for the reader in that you don't get your happy ending.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Frodo went through shit. It doesn't matter that the world was saved. He's still miserable. Deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really interesting and very specific choice that Tolkien made to continue the book after the conclusion of the story, basically.
Yes.
Because he could have stopped it at the world is saved, Aragorn's getting married, here's the happy ending.
He wanted you to know that Frodo was miserable.
He did.
He wanted you to know. And that's what makes it, okay, maybe visceral is the wrong word, but meaningful at least.
Meaningful. Yeah, I'll agree with you on meaningful. I do think visceral is the wrong word, but I will agree with you on meaningful.
Unavoidable, confrontational, I think is maybe the word I was looking for. It confronts you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say there. right? Like it's there. It's not necessarily in your face because we don't actually, since a lot of it is more from Sam's point of view in like that final section, we don't really see how Frodo is suffering. We know a little bit, but we don't have firsthand.
But it's unavoidable that he is.
It is unavoidable, yeah.
It is not glossed over.
Yeah, I mean, you as a reader, you do know that he's suffering. Like you can't misunderstand that.
Yeah. And I think that's very poignant.
Yeah, I agree.
Frodo is triumphant and miserable. Frodo loses.
Frodo does lose more than just a finger.
More than just a finger. I know there's the whole like, oh, the ring leaves its mark, blah blah blah. But no, it's war that does that to Frodo. The grander concept of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ring is symbolic of war in this case.
Yeah. Anyway, all of that. I mean, like, what am I gonna say? I haven't been in combat. I don't fucking know. I think Tolkien's trying to say something. Isn't there a meme that's like, I think it's trying to say something? That's this whole book to me. It was like poor Frodo going through his bullshit and me going, wow, that's a novel.
Yep.
While over here I'm going, I really like the romance between Eowyn and Faramir because it really feels like those crazy kids can go the distance.
I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about Eowyn, particularly on this reread.
Fair, but that doesn't mean they can't go the distance.
They maybe could, although she switches her feelings from Aragorn to Faramir pretty damn fast. I mean, she's like one day in love with Aragorn and the next she's in love with Faramir.
I feel like the language around Aragorn was not.
It wasn't true love. I mean, she loved the idea of him and the idea of the glory that she could have with him more than she actually loved him, for sure.
Yeah. There was more of the romanticism of him.
Yeah.
Than him.
Yeah. And I do think that she's actually like in love with Faramir as a person.
I think they are actually a good match, which is very different.
Yes. Also that. But that doesn't change the fact that her feelings from Aragorn to Faramir shift very quickly.
Yeah, but she didn't know Aragorn for that long, so who cares?
She doesn't know Faramir for that long either.
No, but knowing some guy for 2 weeks and then saying, wait, no, this other guy's better, that's fine. It's not like she was obsessed with Aragorn for years.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, the text does kind of make it sound like a deep and abiding thing until it's not. But I do think that she's a little harsh on Aragorn when she accuses him of dismissing her for being a woman. She does that actually quite early on in the book. She has a whole scene where he's about to go off to Dunharrow and she's like, don't go there, or if you have to, then I'll go with you. And he's like, no, you have to stay with your people because you're their leader when Theoden's off. And she's like, you're just saying that because I'm a woman.
I think that she is also recovering from Wormtongue's bullshit. And I think she's taking a lot of her trauma out on Aragorn, which is not fair, for sure. But Eowyn's been through some shit by this point.
And to be fair, I think it's Aragorn actually who makes that point later on, talking to someone else. But that still doesn't make me like that scene anymore.
I like that scene because it really humanizes Eowyn. A lot of Tolkien's female characters are supreme goddesses.
It's true. I mean, Eowyn is very flawed in a way that Galadriel, for example, in The Lord of the Rings, or Arwen, is not. Like, Eowyn has some major flaws, some glaring flaws.
All right. I'm not going to get back into my Rohan are the average Joes, and that's why I love the Rohirrim are the average Joes, and that's why I love them so much. But Eowyn's actually like an actual lady who's got some baggage, and she's working through it, and she kicks ass anyway.
She does, but I feel very conflicted about her kicking ass because, again, like, she leaves her people very irresponsibly to go kick ass. And I'm like, Eowyn, you have duties. Like, you can't just decide that you want glory and go off and get glory. Like, you have a responsibility to your people that you are just dropping like a hot potato.
Okay, but counterpoint, she dresses up like a man to go fight,
Yeah.
tale as old as time. And in the book, everyone knows it's her.
Some people know it's her. Not everyone, but some people know it's her, for sure.
The company that she's in knows it's her.
They definitely do.
And they just pretend it's not because they like her and want to fight with her. They respect her and trust her.
Sure. I'm not disagreeing there, but also that doesn't change the fact that she has a responsibility to the people that she left behind. Theoden left her in charge and she's just like, no, I'm gonna go off and go into battle. And I understand that inclination, but I still think it's irresponsible of her.
Of course it is. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing that Tolkien writes a really great character who makes bad decisions because she's a kid. I mean, not a kid, but she's a young person. But the people she's fighting with respects her. So it's not like the text treats her like a stupid idiot child. But we, the reader, can say like, hey, that was probably not the right thing to do. It's very complex in a way that his female characters don't normally get. And that's what makes Eowyn so great.
She is complex. I agree with you there. I agree that the people that she's fighting with, her company, respect her. And I mean, she doesn't make a bad decision because in the sense that nothing bad comes of it.
It worked out, but it was still not a good decision. How's that?
But it's not a good decision. But I think that I would have less of a problem with it if the narrative acknowledged some of that nuance, because the narrative doesn't really say, we get it, but you're maybe making a bad decision. The narrative is like, nah, she's making the right decision. She's going off for glory and she's getting her glory.
I think it was written at a time where she needed that pump up, so to speak.
Maybe that may be true, but I'm reading it in 2023 and I wanted a little more.
So I'm recalling the last Pratchett book we read, where a female character was given a very hard time. And even though she actually did some decent stuff, the text treated her very poorly. And I think this is the flip side of that. This is a female character making very human choices, but the text wants to make sure that you know that she's still a good guy.
Okay, I like that argument. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, like the narrative is saying, hey, she fucked up, but it's okay.
But it still frustrates me the way that the way that the Pratchett novel frustrated me.
Okay, but I will always take frustrating me on the side of female empowerment.
That's fair.
Especially in the 40s or whenever the fuck this was.
That's fair.
Yeah. 50s? 40s? Around there. No, I love Eowyn. And I love her because she's flawed. That's part of it.
55 is when it was published.
She also has a very beautiful romance with Faramir.
We don't see a lot of it, actually.
No, you don't have to. That's fine.
We see a little bit of it.
You get like a little glimpse, an implication of a larger whole. And it's very normal. They are recovering together. Like they've both gone through this horrible thing. And no one else in the world can understand it but each other. And so they lean on each other. And that's really sweet.
It is sweet. I mean, they do have a cute romance. Yeah. It's true.
It's very small. Like, this is not a romance novel. By any means, but they still get their chapter. So fuck everyone else.
they do get some narrative focus time. It's true.
They get more than Arwen does on the page.
Yeah, they do get more than that.
Yeah.
Possibly because Arwen and Aragorn have a relationship that is already in place, whereas Faramir and Eowyn's relationship has to develop.
Yeah, sure. But I feel like they're the romance that eclipses, probably because of the movies,
I don't actually really remember. I mean, it's been a shamefully long time since I watched the movies, to be honest.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Gross.
Actually, no, that's not true. On the flight home from Morocco, I watched the movies on the airplane, the regular editions, but I wasn't paying attention to them like it was on in the background.
That's like 6 months.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, it's not that long. That was June. That's not 6 months.
Okay, fine.
It was mid-June to mid-September.
All right. Confession.
Not 6 months at all.
I probably watch the movies roughly 3 times a year.
I do not. I do not.
This is a drastic cutback from when I was in high school, and I watched them roughly twice a week.
Tell you what, when you come and visit next time, we can watch them.
You know I'm coming down for our cousin's baby shower, right?
I do know that, yes.
All right, good. We'll watch them then.
I'm counting on it.
Excellent. So, I hate Denethor, and I love to hate Denethor. He deserved it. He has earned it.
He is such a dick in the beginning of this. I mean, in all of the book too, but specifically in the beginning of the book, before he thinks like Faramir is actually dead. He's so mean to poor Faramir.
Yeah. He's horrible. I also think maybe he's part of the reason why I subscribe so much shit to the monarchy. Because the alternative is Denethor, and clearly Tolkien doesn't like him.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would rather have Aragorn over Denethor. There's no question there.
Yeah. That feels too convenient.
You mean you feel like Tolkien was very pointedly making the alternative to the monarchy a shitty person?
Yeah.
So that he could have a feel-good monarchy story?
I don't think it was that conscious. I really don't. I think it was, or at least I don't fucking know. I never met the guy. But it feels to me more like Tolkien believes that a king should truly care for his people.
I mean, that's not a wild belief to have about a king.
Well, it is, because it turns out kings are actually human beings and suck. But in his fantasy world, kings actually care for their people. And in this fantasy world, the regular folk, power corrupts, right? That's still a normal thing. For the royalty, power does not corrupt. But for the regular folk, it does.
I disagree with that take, because I think the point is not that power corrupts, because it's not Denethor's time as steward that has corrupted him. It's specifically him looking into the Palantir, which is controlled by Sauron, and like Sauron has bent Denethor to his will. It's not power that has done that.
That's awfully convenient, though.
Is it?
It just so happens that the natural king is perfect. And it just so happens that the steward is a dumbass who fell to the Palantir.
He has been looking into that Palantir for like the last 80 years or something. Like, it's not just he happened to do it.
Yeah, but who wrote that? Who decided that he was doing it for 80 years? Tolkien.
I think that our anti-monarchy views are coloring your perspective.
Okay. I'm willing to accept this, but I don't know. If we're allowed to acknowledge the Silmarillion, which I know we're not right now, but let's just pretend for a second. I feel like Tolkien believes in a monarchy, but he also believes that they are held to standards, and that the kings who do not look out for their people are punished. If we look at Numenor and all that shit. But that still feels like there's meant to be a king, and he is meant to look out for his people.
So I agree with you up to a certain point. I mean, I don't think that Tolkien is saying at any point in his books that everyone needs a king and that monarchy is like the natural way of things.
I didn't say everyone needs a king. I said there is a rightful king.
Right, but
and when you have the rightful
there
king,
genuinely is a rightful king here.
And when you accept the rightful king, everything is good. And when you reject the rightful king, everything goes bad.
Okay, I disagree there because like Denethor is not rejecting the rightful king necessarily. I mean, well, he does kind of do that, actually.
He is
Yeah,
specifically doing
he is
that.
specifically.
Because of the corruption.
But that's
still,
that's not the cause of their problems.
No, I don't think this is conscious. I think this is Tolkien's subconscious spilling through. I don't think he did it on purpose. I think this is his books telling on him.
I don't think so. I think this is a fantasy world.
That who created?
Yeah, but like I don't think that he's saying
he has to take No. You take responsibility for your fantasy world.
Sure, but I don't think that he's saying that the problem with Gondorian society up until now is that they haven't recognized Aragorn as the rightful heir to the throne.
No, he's saying the problem is that the kings weren't taking good enough care of their people. I don't think this was a conscious like rebellion of his. I think this is his personal values spilling out on the page on accident.
I don't
Kings are meant to take care of their people, and when they don't, everything goes wrong. And when you have a king that will take care of your people, everything will be better. Shut the fuck up and listen to the king.
I don't know. I'm not sure I can articulate why I don't like your argument, but I don't like your argument.
Oh, well, I don't like it because I don't like the monarchy, and I would sure love to like this book more. Doesn't mean it's not right.
Maybe.
I don't know. He's got some weird bloodline shit that you can't really excuse otherwise. And I'm bending over backwards to try to say that, no. But the king is also beholden to his people. Don't worry, guys. I'm defending Tolkien, if nothing.
I just hand wave it away as fantasy. It's a fantasy book.
No, you don't get to do that. He created this fantasy world. He made these decisions. You don't get to say, like, I can't help it. It just happens to be a magical world where only virgins have power. That doesn't mean anything. Like, no, that's not a thing. You can't.
But like, if it was something like that, yes. Okay, I don't know. Maybe you're right.
Yeah. It's not that concrete, of course.
It's still, I guess what I'm coming up against is that I don't see it as inherently, like the way that you are arguing is that it's an inherently bad thing, and I don't see that.
Well, that's me. I think it's inherently bad thing.
Yeah,
because obviously the monarchy is bad.
like your argument is so negative, and I'm struggling to disagree with it because I mean I think you do have points, but I don't think it's an inherently negative thing. Although I'm not pro monarchy in the real world.
In Tolkien's universe, when the king does a good job and actually loves his people, everything is fine. And that's what he should do. When the king betrays his people, there is retribution, as it should be, according to Tolkien. But that's still a lot of power being given to some random dude who got shat out of the right vagina.
That's fair.
I don't know. They're like, I really love Tolkien's version of the monarchy, where if they fuck up, they get kicked out. That would be great. If that was true, awesome.
Yeah,
the last round of kings that fucked up got sunk.
They did. They got very sunk, except for the good ones.
If every king who fucked up got sunk, that'd be awesome.
It would be.
So his version of the monarchy has checks and balances.
Yeah.
But that ain't reality. I don't know. I think that's my problem with it. He has created this like beautiful version that where they have. I think that's it. He believes in God who will punish a bad king. Unfortunately, kings can be as bad as they want.
Yeah. I mean, I can't be that mad about a fictional monarchy that works. Whereas sure, I'll be mad about a non-fictional monarchy that doesn't work.
No, because he invented it. What?
I'm saying I don't spend that much time thinking about Tolkien's monarchy and being mad about Tolkien's monarchy.
Fascinating. Okay. I need to justify why I'm allowed to like these books, even though I disagree with their like inherent concept.
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
This entire rant was why I'm allowed to like these books, even though Aragorn is the king and therefore there's a happy ending.
I don't have that problem. That's not an issue that I have to justify to myself.
Oh no. Anyone who creates a fantasy world is responsible for that world. They don't get to
Sure.
say, no, it's a fantasy world, so who cares what happens in it? No, you
Sure.
invented it. It belongs to you.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't care that there's a fictional monarchy where things have checks and balances.
But because there's checks and balances, that's why it's okay.
Right. And I'm saying I don't care about it.
It doesn't bother me because of all the things I just said. It's okay. He set up checks and balances. I think maybe I'm arguing against every other fantasy world right now.
Possibly.
Because if you create a fantasy world where there's a terrible system and then you go, that's just the way it is. No, that's just the way you made it. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I agree with that argument.
And it does not apply to this book because even though there's some bullshit monarchy shit, there are literal forces of nature keeping them in check. That sure ain't the way it is in real life, but that's how it is in this story. That's why no fantasy author is off the hook for writing a terrible world.
Again, it's more thought than I give to fictional monarchies. But I do agree that authors should take responsibility for the worlds they create. I mean, I definitely think that there are a lot of fantasy concepts that are much more harmful, where the author, yes, says, that's just how it is, not this is how I made it, where they don't take responsibility for it.
Yes, thank you. You have articulated what I've spent maybe half an hour trying to say.
Talking about kings, though, and Aragorn specifically, one thing I'd forgotten is just how snarky he can be sometimes.
Aragorn is great. I know I just complained about the monarchy a lot, but I do love Aragorn.
You did just complain about the monarchy a lot, but there's a moment in this book where Aragorn, he's at the House of Healing, trying to heal Faramir, and he's asked for Athelas, and he's like, it's also called Kingsfoil. And Yorith, the woman there, the nurse, she says, I don't know if we have any. I don't think so. I'm not familiar with Athelas. Let me call the herb master. And the herb master comes in and he spends a good like 3/4 of a page talking about the history of the name and why they don't have any, you know, it has no virtue that we know of, save perhaps to sweeten a fouled air. And he talks about some rhymes that he doesn't actually think are true. And he spends a whole lot of page time talking about how useless Athelas is, basically. And then a couple of pages later, after Aragorn has finally gotten some Kingsfoil, he's talking to Merry, and he throws a lot of shade on this herb master. Merry asks him for some pipeweed, and Aragorn replies that he doesn't have any. And if Merry doesn't have any, he must send for the herb master of this house, and he will tell you that he did not know that the herb you desire had any virtues, but that it is called Westman's weed by the vulgar, and Galanas by the noble, and other names in other tongues more learned. And after adding a few half-forgotten rhymes that he does not understand, he will regretfully inform you that there is none in the house, and he will leave you to reflect on the history of tongues. And I just loved that. And it's not an immediate payoff because there's like 5 or 6 pages in between the first scene and this scene. And I was not expecting that level of snark from Aragorn.
Well, Tolkien is savage.
Tolkien is so savage.
And that was a beautiful example. I really love how that specific moment criticizes the academic man, right? The herb master.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't specifically celebrate Ioreth, but kind of implies that she's great, especially considering like the larger context of the chapter and how she participates in the healing. And she is like, there's some jokes made about her, like she's gossipy, whatever. But Ioreth gets shit done, and her boss is fucking useless.
She's definitely way more competent. She doesn't have as much book learning as the herb master necessarily, but she is way more competent than he is, clearly.
And that is very poignant, I think.
Certainly is pointed.
Well, pointed, yes. I don't know. Again, not to harp too hard on Tolkien's writing of female characters, but I feel like it's worth bringing up because that's one of the big detractors against him, of people who haven't actually read the fucking books and have only seen the movies. He does not only write heroic female characters. He does have his like goddesses. He's got his goddesses. No one can say he don't.
He has a lot of heroic female characters.
But he also has Eowyn, who's got flaws. And he has Ioreth, who is an every woman. There's nothing heroic about her. She's just a lady doing her job. And she's so good at it. And her boss sucks. And she's doing her best. And she saves lives.
Yeah, I liked Ioreth. We don't really see that much of her. I mean, we have this scene, and we have a scene, I think, outside the city walls when Aragorn is making his triumphant return as king, and she's talking to a cousin or something about how, oh, she was the one who found him. And she's definitely being poked fun at there. Like, no question about it.
Definitely. She's gossipy. I think we see her a couple of times, right? Like, first she's gossiping about, like, oh, there's this saying about the king who will show up, and then the king shows up. And then later she's like, oh, yeah, I called that.
Yeah, but that's still not very many times. Like, she doesn't show up a lot.
She doesn't show up a lot, but when she does show up, at least in the House of Healing, she's the one who actually gets the Athelos, isn't she?
I don't think so.
The Herb Master talks too much and doesn't accomplish anything. Whereas she's like, yeah, my grandfather smokes that. I'll be right back.
No, she's the one who says, we don't have any, let me call the Herb Master.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I am sure. No, we have none of it, I am sure. Why, I've never heard that it had any great virtue. And indeed, I have often said to my sisters when we came upon it growing in the woods, Kingsfoil, I said, 'tis a strange name, and I wonder why 'tis called so. And then Aragorn says, if you love the Lord Faramir, run as quick as your tongue and get me Kingsfoil if there is a leaf in the city.
Oh, but she's the one who finds it then.
No, it's because Burgle comes running in and he bore 6 leaves in a cloth. It is Kingsfoil, sir, he said, but not fresh, I fear.
Who's Burgle?
I think that Burgle is maybe Baragon's son, not a main character. I think Burgle, if I'm correct, and I could be mistaken, I think so. Baragon is the
city watch, basically.
The guardsman that that Pippin makes friends with.
Yeah.
And Burgle is his son, and Pippin spends like an afternoon with him wandering around the city.
That sounds right. Okay, well, she's just an example of a minor female character who is more competent than her boss.
Yes, I agree with you there. She is definitely more competent than the Herb Master.
Yes, that's all. She's not a major character by any means.
Yeah, no, she's not a major character.
But it's important because, again, an argument about these books is that the only female characters are these amazing goddesses.
I thought the argument was that there are very few female characters.
Statistically, there are few. Sure.
It's a hard argument to disprove.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to argue against that. But there are important female characters, and they are real people. That's my argument. And Ioreth is a real person. Yes, she gets poked fun of, but she's not like the butt of every joke.
Yeah, I do think that even in her earlier scenes, she is kind of subtly poked fun at.
It's even better that she's poked fun at because no, not every female character is an untouchable goddess.
She's definitely not an untouchable goddess.
Now, you got funny ladies like Ioreth. You also have Lobelia, who, I feel like the Hobbit refrain of this book, not refrain, coda, The Hobbit coda of this book deserves an entire episode unto itself.
Just an episode on the scouring of the Shire.
Yeah, so much happens.
There's a lot that happens.
The hobbits come home and then like apply everything that they've learned from their adventures to basically be heroes in their small town. There's such a thing there.
It's a very triumphant description of their character growth.
I was gonna say whoopee cushion sound. They saved the fucking world, and now they come home and they have to just like raise a rabble militia.
Yeah, but with the exception of Frodo and Sam, Frodo, who doesn't really do much in the scouring of the Shire, no one else was that instrumental in leading the events, the war against Sauron. And so here we get to see them move from participants to leaders and apply the knowledge that they have learned. And I think that is very triumphant and not just whoopee cushion sound.
No, you're right. It is a little bit big fish, small pond.
It is definitely a little bit big fish, small pond. Like they have gone from being the guests of kings and from literally saving the world to saving their hometown. But I think that makes it even more worthwhile, because what is the world if you don't have your hometown to come back to?
And that's true. Maybe it's actually the opposite narrative of Frodo. Frodo, who goes off to war and comes back gravely injured physically and psychically from his experience, versus Merry and Pippin, who face combat and then come home so triumphant that they managed to win the combat at home as well.
I mean, I do think it is, yes, it is a counterpoint to Frodo's story, showing the evolution of Merry and Pippin, who start off as maybe not quite as prankstery, trickstery, silly, thoughtless people as they are in the movies, but they're still not serious necessarily.
They're soft, noble boys.
Yeah. And so in the events here, we see that they've learned to take action.
They've learned. They've grown.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then in Sam, you have the soldier who comes home and procreates a ton.
He has a lot of children.
It's less that he has a lot of children and more that the first thing he does when he comes home is goes to find his girlfriend.
Yeah, but he's not going to go find his girlfriend because he wants to have carnal relations with her immediately. Like, he's not going home to bang her. He's going because his town, his country is on fire, and he wants to make sure that she and her parents are safe.
No, it's a metaphor for sure. Oh, I really love the Shire part of the ending of this book. I don't know. There's something so significant about everything they did out in the world, and then they come home and even home isn't safe.
Yeah, I do really like that. I mean, I don't like it, but I like it.
Well, and more importantly, fucking Lobelia Sackville-Baggins gets a huge redemption arc.
I do enjoy that.
That matters so much.
And she gets applauded when she's never been applauded before in her life. And she's very confused.
She fucked up. Okay. Sure. She fucked up.
I mean, she's not been a very pleasant hobbit.
But you don't have to be a nice person to not be a bad guy. I think that's what I love about Lobelia Sackville-Baggins. She's an unpleasant person who's still a good guy.
Yes.
And that matters.
She's not a villain.
No. Plenty of sour people are not villains. You can't just say, you're mean to me, therefore you're a bad person. Plenty of people who are mean to you are good people. And that's a hard thing to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
And you're confronted with that in Lobelia.
Well, I don't know if I would say confronted, really, because we don't see very much of Lobelia.
Well, in the concept of her.
Yeah.
Right? She is one of the villains. And not I mean, obviously she's not Sauron. But Lobelia, the Sackville-Bagginses are such a well-known name in pop culture, I would say.
Yeah.
And in this book, she helps save the day. She turns on, what is it her son? Otho?
Yes, I think so.
Her son who like invited in the orcs, or not technically orcs.
She doesn't turn on him. I think she says something to the men who are going about the Shire, and they lock her up.
Hey, I mean, that's something.
Yeah.
She was one of the privileged, and she stood up for what was right and went to jail for it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she like tries to hit them with an umbrella or something.
I guess what I'm saying is people should be allowed to change and grow, and Lobelia is the proof of that. Or example of that, not proof.
She comes down the lane with her old umbrella. Some of the ruffians were going up with a big cart. "Where be you a-going?" says she. "To Bag End," says they. "What for?" says she. "To put up some sheds for Sharky," says they. "Who said you could?" says she. "Sharky," says they. "So get out of the road, old hagling. I'll give you Sharky, you dirty thieving ruffians," says she, and ups with her umbrella and goes for the leader, near twice her size. So they took her, dragged her off to the lockholes at her age, too.
I mean, she makes bad choices.
Granted, I'm not entirely sure she was fully aware of what she was doing.
Maybe not.
I do appreciate that she does stand up against the invaders, but I'm not entirely sure that it was
conscious
with 100% control of her faculties. Yeah.
But at the end, she does give everything back to Frodo.
She does. Yes.
She doesn't have to do that.
No, she doesn't have to do that at all.
Especially considering how we've heard that she's like lusted
Greedy
after Bag End.
Yeah.
So I would say that she has grown.
I think that she grows in prison rather than grows before that event.
Okay, sure.
But she does, you're right, she does grow.
I don't think she should be considered, okay, she's probably one of the only Hobbit names that I won't say the average layperson knows, but the like halfway nerd knows. Wouldn't you say? She's greatly maligned.
I wouldn't go that far, because she is pretty horrible for most of her appearances. She does grow out of it.
She grows out of it, and in pop culture, that's never acknowledged.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's my problem.
Well, I think that when people think of her, they mostly think of her from The Hobbit, where she does not change. At least that's where I think of her.
She's in the beginning of the Fellowship.
She is, but that's not when I think about her.
She's after his spoons.
Scouring of the Shire is also only in the extended version of the movies.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Scouring, it's not even in the extended version.
Is it not in the extended version?
No. There's no war in the Shire ever. There's no conflict there.
Isn't there something, though?
They get like an extended goodbye scene.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't actually do any fighting there. It could have been a whole movie.
So Lobelia doesn't have a chance to grow in the
cinematic universe,
which is probably where most people think of her.
Hence my issue.
Justice for Lobelia Sackville-Baggins.
Yes, Fatty Bulger and Lobelia Sackville-Baggins.
That should be our new podcast tagline.
It should.
Speaking of things that could be their own movie, I want to have a quick rant about the appendices of this book and Rings of Power, because it reminded me, reading the appendices reminded me how disappointed I was in Rings of Power, which only has the right to, even though it's a story about the Second Age, I believe it only has the right to the appendices and maybe like one or two things from the Silmarillion. And there is so much in the appendices that is just a framework that they could have then filled out in whatever way they wanted, instead of basically making shit up wholesale. And like, I'm fine with changing things because an adaptation has to. That's just the nature of adaptations. And I'm fine with an adaptation that's basically fan fiction if you acknowledge that, but don't try to tell me that something is Tolkien when you're just making shit up wholesale. And when you could, like, there's so much that they could have done in the show based on the appendices, and reading it just made me mad all over again.
Well, I agree completely. I have a confession to make. The moment in the TV show that they had a poor peasant woman wearing a bright blue dress, I couldn't take it seriously anymore. The movies would never do that. They were so thoughtful about costuming.
Yeah,
Indigo was has always been so expensive, and I know that that's a real world thing, but that's the kind of real world thing that the movies would have taken into consideration. Even The Hobbit, like, fuck off with your issues with The Hobbit, not you, just the general you.
I know we've had a whole podcast episode about The Hobbit.
Yeah,
we are in agreement there.
That's just so cinematic at the expense of realism that I couldn't take anything they did seriously. And I know that's like the least of their problems, but I think it's emblematic.
Yeah, I don't mind that specifically. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief and say, okay, maybe the use of indigo in Middle-earth, which, yes, is basically just Earth, but older, is maybe not as rare. Whatever, I can ignore this.
Then why was she the only bitch in an indigo dress?
That's true.
No, they just wanted her to stand out visually, and I'm so mad. But that's a stupid thing to be mad about, but I am.
Yeah, but it really felt with the show, and I did watch all of the episodes, much to my regret.
Kudos to you. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have, because I was mad about all of them. It really felt like they were just going, hey, what's going to be cool in this episode? We're not going to think of how that fits in with the story we're telling or the framework of the world or anything that Tolkien has ever written. We're just going to go and do our own thing. And again, that's fine, but I just want them to acknowledge that, and they didn't. And if you like the show, sorry, you probably shouldn't have been listening to this.
I am actually willing to watch all of the episodes. I haven't. I did rage quit at one point, but I think I'm a more mature person now. That's not true. I just have more distance. I think I will always see it. Like you said, it's fan fiction.
Yeah.
She's the Mary Sue. She's got the beautiful long blonde hair with blue highlights and the like gorgeous indigo dress with her big titties popping out. And her name is Raven Dementia Way. And she's living in a world called My Immortal. Like, I can accept that, then it's fine.
Yeah, like, I think you really do have to go in acknowledging that it's not going to be anything like Tolkien, and that's fine. You can enjoy it. Like, everyone is welcome to enjoy the show. I'm not saying people shouldn't watch it or people shouldn't enjoy it. You do you. But I do think it's not Tolkien at all.
It's the wild fan fiction version. You know what? If fan fiction authors can do it, so can big studios.
Yes, but fan fiction authors acknowledge what they're doing.
I was gonna say, but I'm gonna judge you on fan fiction rules. So buckle up, buckos.
I actually give a lot of leeway to fan fiction that I don't to other things. So by fan fiction rules, they're probably doing okay for me. But again, I just want some acknowledgement that.
Oh, I guarantee you straight up there's not going to be enough sex to hold my attention.
Yeah, I don't think we get any sex in the first season of Rings of Power. Wheel of Time, we get sex in the first season of Wheel of Time and in the second season.
Yeah, but who cares? That's Wheel of Time. Why would anyone watch that?
Because it's a better adaptation than Rings of Power.
Oh, I'm sure it's an amazing adaptation. That's it. That's all it gets. I'm leaving that. That was a tense stare down. I would like everyone listening to know.
I wanted to see if you would say something else. I didn't think you would, and you didn't.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I caved first. Is the
you did?
I lost that stare down.
Yep.
Oh, but we're not talking about Wheel of Time. We're talking about The Lord of the Rings. And I love it. The Return of the King / The War of the Ring is a good book. There's some incredible characters. I think this is the best book. I don't think we should say it's the best book. I think it's a good ending of a series.
I think it's probably my favorite part, like my favorite book in the trilogy to read. It's a good ending.
It is.
Yeah.
It's when the most shit happens.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, Frodo. I love you. You hanging out with elves is nice, but no. The first 2 books is just Frodo hanging out with elves, and in the third book, shit goes down.
Doesn't hang out with elves at all in book 2.
Now, Galadriel's book 1, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, fine. Well, the first book is a lot of him hanging out with elves.
Which I like. I mean, if I had to rank them, I think it would be
3, 1, 2.
3, 1, 2, yeah.
I agree. But that's because 2 is merely a bridge. I would probably rank any book that way. I like the ending best and the beginning next and the middle in the middle, or at the end, I guess. But that's unfair. This is one story. And I know we've already had this conversation.
We have.
But I stand by it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye!